What is Wimbledon? For 125 years, players and fans have made the pilgrimage to SW19, a quiet suburb of London, to try to find the answer.
You behave almost in a different way when you come here because you are aware of what it means to the sport and the richness of the tradition of the place.
At its core lies a simple rectangle, 78 feet by 36 feet, surrounded by 18 other identical rectangles. Add some texture, grass, out of date in tennis terms, but vivid and tactile. Who wants to touch clay or hardcourt? Simply the most famous lawn in the world.
As far as Wimbledon's concerned, it's all about the players. What we do is to provide the right stage, the right environment for them to perform on.
Now start painting the broad strokes. Tradition, pomp, ceremony, quintessentially British.
Wimbledon is this extraordinary mix of British tradition and then the sport at its most modern best.
Fill in the background. Fans, polite but supportive. Jingoistic, maybe, but with no British men's singles winner since 1936, give them a break. Finally, the masterstrokes, the players, artists and artisans, punchers and counter-punchers, all of them seduced sooner or later by its unique aura.
It's a feeling, and some people have it before they even get there, but those that didn't have it, they certainly get it later, and it touches everyone.
But what is in Wimbledon's aesthetic, its DNA, that makes this place one of the most enduring and endearing sports arenas in the world? In celebrating Wimbledon's 125th anniversary, we discover the reasons. We begin with the years 1877 to 1939. A typical scene for many a young player dreaming of one day becoming Wimbledon champion. But these four young girls are in fact following in fabled footsteps. It was here, at Warple Road, now the playing fields of the Wimbledon High School for girls, that the championships were first played in 1877. The game would be recognisable to the first competitors, but only just. No one could have anticipated how Wimbledon and its championships would come to dominate the landscape of a game first regarded as no more than a gentle pastime for the lawns of the country gentry. 22 players entered the first men-only championships, with Spencer Gore, an old boy of Harrow School, claiming the first prize of 12 guineas and a silver challenge trophy.
Play!
The championships probably came and went with very little fuss. I mean, you have to remember that tennis did not have any working-class roots. I think they called it patter. This sort of faux sport was not for them. And you have to give credit to the members who actually stuck their necks out and decided to go ahead with this completely novel championship. It could have remained a marginalised niche sport that fizzled out like croquet.
Over the next few years, popularity of the game and of Wimbledon grew and broadened, fueled by a women's singles title, first won by Maud Watson in 1884. The club came to claim a central position in the world tennis calendar, adopting, if only for a few years, the title of the World Championships on Grass.
It was a day out, and people took it quite seriously. At this early period, it wasn't at the stage of getting onto the London social calendar, like Henley or Ascot or Lord's, but there was a presence about it. You're beginning to get the cultural aspect of being seen at these events.
Times have indeed changed through the years. but not so much. A day out at Wimbledon has become a social and sporting necessity, a must-do for all walks of life. Everyone, it seems, wants to be part of the summer garden party, which, with its champagne and strawberries, is so intrinsically linked to a British summer. A tennis tournament, yes, but also a place to be seen and admired. Royal patronage, which continues through to this day, only underlines its standing.
Do you have a sense that it's a very privileged lifestyle that you're stepping into, and that it's an extraordinarily elegant experience, but at the same time it's very inclusive? I mean, you can walk around the grounds and you'll see people from all walks of life and from all over the world coming to enjoy the sport. So I don't think it's elitist in that respect, but you do still have a sense of grandeur and that it's a special place to be.
As Wimbledon became more and more popular at the turn of the 20th century, so did its champions. But all were happy to conform to the dress, decorum and attitudes expected of Victorian England. Then, someone tore up the rule book.
I think every now and again along comes somebody special in sport who transforms it and widens its appeal. Certainly Suzanne Lenglen was such a person.
Before the modern tennis superstar, before Chrissy, Steffi or Serena, came Suzanne Lenglen. Flamboyant, flighty and feisty. Such was her reputation that spectators trampled over the hedges to watch her debut in 1919 on Court 4 at the Old Warple Road.
The fact that Suzanne was really the first great electric woman player meant so much to Wimbledon, to come out and see this extraordinary female athlete.
She was a wonderful personality. Not a very pretty girl, but a very vivacious one. Her personality won over people with this beautiful balletic grace, moving so wonderfully on the court. And her accuracy and control of the ball was second to none.
Lenglen may have won 6 singles titles, but it was her French sense of style and a diva's temperament that she was best known for. While outside the courts, the suffragettes were fighting for women's rights, inside Wimbledon, the fortunes of the fairer sex were far more advanced. Lenglen led the way, with dresses a trifle shorter, a little flimsier, and a lot more risque than everyone else's.
Her dresses were copied as women's fashion and sold in the shops. And French women would buy them and thought how wonderful they looked in Suzanne dresses.
She was a character like we've never had, certainly, and I'm not so sure there's ever been a women athlete like her. You know, she would entertain the press after a match in her bathtub. I assume there were soap bubbles, but maybe not. She was a very fluid tennis player. You see the pictures of her jumping and so forth, and it was not uncommon for one breast or the other to fall out of her outfit. And on the French Riviera, they had even named her breast Mary Jane. The wise guys would say, who do you think we're going to see today, Mary or Jane? It did not bother Suzanne one bit. She'd tuck it back in and go right on playing.
Lenglen may have laid the foundations of fashion at Wimbledon, but it was designer Teddy Tinling who raised the hemline to another level. His outfits for Gussie Moran, not Wimbledon's greatest player, still managed to raise eyebrows around the world in the 1940s. His creations continued to inspire on-court fashion trends for the next 30 years. Wimbledon became a fashion parade almost as much as a tennis tournament, as players and clothing companies began to capitalize on the best catwalk in the sporting calendar.
It's a very personality-driven game. It's a very individual sport. And I think that their personalities show through with what they're wearing. And I think that the world of Nike and Adidas and Lacoste and everybody else has realized that. And more with new fabrics and new designs, they're realizing that this can be just so important for their different brands through the young men and women that are wearing them on court.
We think always about the backdrop, and that's the color of the court, or of the walls, the baseline walls behind them, whatever the advertising or lack of advertising might be. At Wimbledon, it's so pure and clean, so it forces you to be more clever with cut lines and with a neckline or something that might look more dramatic, just in white, as opposed to relying on a bright color, fighting against a court backdrop.
Fashion statements have become stronger and more daring, sometimes too strong, too daring. But the All England Club's predominantly white clothing rule is just one way that Wimbledon asserts its uniqueness over every other tournament in the world.
It feels like its own environment. You know, the rules are set in stone, and there's no getting around them, and there's no bending them, and it runs a certain way. You feel like you're part of something that's much bigger than not only you, but in many ways, it feels bigger than the sport.
There's a very hefty apparel manufacturing guidebook showing what is and is not acceptable. There are certain specific asks, and one of them is that the back of the garment should be all white. So we definitely pay attention to that and design to those. But you never quite know until you get to that point whether or not the apparel will pass.
Instead of restricting choice, the all-white rule has created an aesthetic, a simplicity that only adds to the glamour and sex appeal at the very heart of the game.
I think when you're watching tennis at its highest level, it's like watching ballet. I mean, they're so elegant and athletic at the same time that it's a celebration of men and women's bodies, and I think that's become much more prevalent, say, in the last 5 or 10 years, when there's just so much more exposure for the game. And obviously, since it's a game that's really driven by young, very attractive people, fashion goes hand in hand with that particular group.
Fittingly, Suzanne Lenglen hit the very last ball on the old centre court at Warple Road. The crowds that tennis's first celebrity attracted meant Wimbledon had to find a new, bigger home in 1922. The chosen site, just 4 miles up the road at Church Road, SW19. When Lenglen flounced off court in 1926, after an argument about her punctuality, she was unbeaten. She turned professional, a hint of troubles to come, and never returned. But by then, Wimbledon, with its new centre court, modelled on the old, and its broad acres, could live without Lenglen. The championships and the game had developed a life of its own, finding new ways to thrill each year.
For me, Wimbledon has always been a very special place ever since I came here as a junior. But I remember walking through the main gate and up the bank concourse and thinking, wow, I'm actually going to be playing on these courts at Wimbledon. Whoa, what a thrill.
In the 20s and 30s, overseas players began to dominate the tournament. Strapping Americans like Bill Tilden with his booming serve and blistering ground strokes. The French Musketeers, Jean Barotra, Henri Cochet, and René Lacoste. The red-headed Californian Don Budge, who perfected the attacking backhand stroke and won the first ever Grand Slam of major titles in 1 year.
What do you think about English summer, Mr. Budd? Well, I think you had that last week.
Ever-growing crowds flocked to see the insatiable American Helen Wills Moody, winner of 8 Wimbledon singles titles, a feat that would not be beaten for over 50 years. But the best remembered among the home crowd, Fred Perry, the last British men's singles winner, who claimed 3 straight championships in the 30s.
I am very pleased to think that I have at last fulfilled the trust placed in me by the Lawn Tennis Association and carried off the title at Wimbledon. In so doing, I have achieved my own life's ambition.
By the start of the Second World War, the pattern was set. Champions no longer made Wimbledon, Wimbledon made champions. The bond has only strengthened over the decades.
You try to transport yourself in time to the 20s, to the 30s, to the 40s. You imagine all those great players playing there and you just feel it all. So you feel very much alone, but at the same time surrounded by history and surrounded by all those people that have played there, whether they're alive or not.
But for every winner, there has to be a loser. The list of great players to have never won Wimbledon is a very long one. To many, an eternal blot on their careers.
Someone could win 5 French Opens, 10 Australian Opens, 6 US Opens, but they didn't have one Wimbledon. They wouldn't quite feel as though they were fulfilled.
A rapturous centre court welcome. The Scot showed no outward signs of tension.
You win that one.
Murray's
baby,
quest for the first
that's all
British
you need.
men's title in 7
still
decades
see cash.
seemed bolstered by his
First
last
one,
appearance at
going up,
SW19
left the
a
court,
year
and went into the
previously when,
stands.
in the
He
red,
started
white
that
and blue
whole-
of Team GB,
whole tradition.
reclaimed
If he had done that,
Olympic
if he had
gold.
won the US Open and done that, I don't think it would have been
The
embedded in
opening
my
set
memory.
went very much to plan. Murray,
And likewise,
the
if you
victor,
don't
6
do well
games
at
to 4.
Wimbledon, you
But
go to your
Djokovic
grave.
set the home fans'
Somebody saying,
nerves
yes, he was a great
jangling as
player.
he broke the Murray serve in the 4th game of the 2nd set. We join the action with things looking good for the world #1.
All I wanted to do was win the Wimbledon title. And that's all I ever concentrated on. You know, I didn't care about the money, I didn't care about the girls, I didn't care about the fame, I didn't want any of that stuff. All I wanted to do was to win Wimbledon.
That's more like it. I'd love to see him do it more.
While champions come and go, Wimbledon has to balance past, present and future.
The opportunity to step in on the second serve.
I
Absolutely.
think we're very conscious that the whole image of Wimbledon is based on tradition, going back to 1877, keeping those things that are vital to us, grass court tennis, white clothing, limited amounts of advertising around the grounds. But in the same breath, we're in a competitive sports event business, and we need to innovate as well and to change as the years go by.
From the construction of Church Road on, the club has tried to improve and expand. Sometimes the changes are too discreet to even notice, but there is no hiding the march of time. In 1997, the old number 1 court was demolished and replaced by a new state-of-the-art 11,000-seater stadium.
The client doesn't so much define the restrictions, it's other things that come into play. And at Wimbledon, it's the site, it's the history of the grounds. When you go into a club like that, you've got to be very careful about what you do so that it doesn't detract from it. If anything, hopefully every time we touch a piece of it, it is just that little bit better each time.
It was the notorious British weather, one of Wimbledon's more enduring, if unwanted, images, which led to the biggest architectural change
but now
in
could he
recent
make the
years.
most of the opening? Back to the action at 5-all.
When the All England club decided to build a retractable canopy on centre court in 2006, many thought it would have been far cheaper to build an entirely new structure than to install a roof on a stadium built in 1922. But remember, this is Wimbledon.
What they did with centre court is quintessentially English. So what they could have done was to build a 50,000 seat purpose-built arena with lots of corporate hospitality facilities and the latest state-of-the-art technology, but they didn't. What they did is they simply took what they already had and they accentuated it.
I think the public response to the roof has been nothing other than positive, because we've had a lovely situation where the sun shone ever since we built it, and long may it stay that way. But the reaction to taking an existing building, remodelling it, bringing it up to date, putting a roof on it, I think has been a better option for us than having to relocate.
Entering the grandest of stages in the game on finals day remains one of life's seminal moments.
Okay guys, let's go. Good luck to you both.
The walk onto the hallowed turf of Centre Court. The glance at that famous quote. The sense of anticipation. The players feel it, the fans do. It's palpable.
And there's that lovely moment, and you can't see them, but you know they're coming because some people can see them. There's that applause that gets louder and louder and louder, and suddenly they actually come into your view. The hairs still stand up on the back of your hands, and the day that doesn't happen, the day you should go off and be a gravedigger.
Concentrate, focus.
No other 21st century sports arena has the same intimacy or dignity as Centre Court. No scoreboard telling fans to clap, no public announcer, no rock music, no cheerleaders, no mascots, no need.
Murray goes up a break in the second set, 6-5.
It's a great feeling to be able to be there and to see the court that as a kid you grew up watching, and I just love the whole atmosphere of the echo of the ball and just the quietness that they have, you know, before the point, and it's the most unique place I've ever played.
No vista on Centre Court appears by chance. Everything is designed a certain way.
Even when you're sitting at the back of the stadium, the roof slopes down so much that you can't see the rest of the stadium. All you can see is this very tight green slot where the players are playing on that pristine piece of grass. So the building, it focuses the attention to that one intense moment, one man playing against another, one woman playing against the other. And I think the building helps that experience, it helps that intensity.
It's tradition, it means something around the world. It's the well-cut English lawns, the sense of fair play, not shouting, not swearing, making sure that you're respectful to your opponents. This is all part of the package, it's all part of the deal. And I think in many ways it really kind of harks back to an England of, certainly of the 19th century, possibly the 20th century, but it's in England, and I think it's a world where these kind of values and these qualities are no longer present.
Even though the court has changed in its construction and the way it looks over the years, there's still that sense of this is the epicenter of tennis.
A champion's back garden and a challenger's distant land. Never rough or raucous, insistent yet sympathetic, claustrophobic and very public. There is nowhere to run, no place to hide on Centre Court. Just a place to try and claim as their own for a while, knowing that no matter who they are all just passing through. The years 1877 to 1939 laid the foundations of Wimbledon and tennis in general. The period after the Second World War turned the sport into a business. Professionalism arrived, and it was the All England Club who was first to act.
Why just tennis players can't be paid? It didn't make any sense. And that ultimately was the stroke, the lightning, that changed the whole game, because all of a sudden, and it was Wimbledon.
1977 was an annus mirabilis for Great Britain. Queen Elizabeth II toured the country in celebration of her Silver Jubilee, as Britons, quite literally, danced in the streets. At Wimbledon, the centenary All-England Championships were graced by the presence of Her Majesty, and for once, the tennis gods shone on the home nation. Virginia Wade was an elegant, all-court player with talent to spare, but a fragile nerve.
That year, I mean, I was coming, obviously, to the end of what was really my peak years, and I was thinking, you know, I've really messed up so many times at Wimbledon, and the extra aura that it had with the Queen being there and being the centenary year just managed to take my motivation, make it stronger than my nerves.
She's done it. She's done it all. A fairy story comes from
If I watch it now, or if I even talk about it, I might start getting emotional. There was a Queen, and there was so much noise going on. I have no idea what she said.
On Murray
I just
Mound
couldn't
was
hear
starting to believe. Surely the Serbian couldn't fight back from 2 sets down in 40-degree heat and against the collective will of
and
an
then you hold the
entire
trophy
nation.
up, and it's very heavy, by the way. I thought I've never experienced anything like this, and to tell you the truth, it made me feel very, very small.
Think again.
Which was very nice.
Never is a
I
great
just was part
champion
of
more
the
dangerous
whole
than when
thing.
his back's against the wall. We rejoin the action following a break
A
of
fairy
serve
story
for
indeed,
each man.
but
Murray
a far
serving
cry from the
2-3.
preceding decades when British successes at Wimbledon were few and far between. In the second of our 4-part series, we examine an era of huge change, not just at Wimbledon, but on a global scale. In the immediate post-war years, Britain was anxious to get back to normal, yet acutely aware of the difficulty of doing so. The land fit for heroes was still subject to rationing, and there were major shortages of staple foods. The centre court, a metaphor for the country, was gouged by a bomb crater. But the main aim was to get the show back on the road. There was no better symbol of a world at peace than a sunny afternoon at SW19.
Americans would stop off in Ireland on the way here, and Shannon, with the plane would stop and would pick up butter and cheese and whatever, you know, it could have, because they just didn't have those things here at the time.
All of London was very grim still in 1946. We hadn't really yet got over the war. Food was rationed. Some of the American players even brought their own steaks with them, I seem to remember.
I took enough meat to have 2 steaks every day for the 14 days, including about 4 days during the Queen's tournament, which I played in the doubles. And it worked out beautifully. I was mentally prepared. I said, boy, I'm going to have no problems because I'm going to have my regular stuff in there. And it just worked out beautifully. That meat was a big help mentally for me. I hate to admit it, but I guess I was a little steak freak in those days.
It's part of the British nature to be generous with their sport. Invent the game, lay down the rules, export it, and then watch as the rest of the world becomes the masters. Beating the mother country became terrific sport after the Second World War, and where better to advertise the uprising than on the lawns of the most English of sporting events.
Because the Americans hadn't had a war. Their own championship in America was played throughout the war years. They didn't have any breaks, and so they went on playing and came here best prepared of all the competitors who played in 1946 and those next few years. So we had some very great American champions.
I played a lot of matches against Don Budge when he was in the Air Force and I was in the Coast Guard, so we sort of kept sharp, and we were lucky in America, being athletes, that this was available to us.
There were some great American stars of that era. Bob Falkenberg, who used to chuck sets because he would get tired and conserve his energy by conceding a set. Rather a curious thing to think of now, but that's what happened. Jack Kramer, of course.
I'll be very honest with you. I'm fairly lucky in winning my 2 U.S. championships and my Wimbledon title. Anybody that wins Wimbledon is a deserving champion. When you win Wimbledon, you win because on that fortnight, you've been the best player in the world.
Luck or not, the American men claimed 5 consecutive singles titles between 1947 and 1951, but their dominance was eclipsed by that of their female counterparts.
You could name 12, 13, 14 really great American women, the greatest of whom, of course, was Maureen Connolly, the first woman to win the Grand Slam in 1953. But even before her, we'd had Pauline Betts and Louise Brough. I mean, the list goes on, but they were terrific players and set a very high standard.
In that outstanding generation, Maureen Connolly was the most talented, Louise Brough the most effective, but Althea Gibson was the most surprising. Long before the Williams sisters' explosion onto the global stage came the girl from Harlem, 6 foot tall and with a touch of both Venus and Serena in her imposing presence on court.
She was intimidating. She was tall. I don't know how tall, probably 6'2" or so. And she sort of towered over you. She was long and spindly, and this great powerful, she threw the ball up miles high, and this great powerful serve came belting down.
She beat me often. In analyzing her game, she had a great serve, a very good serve, and she had continental strokes, which were, to me, it was always kind of baffling. I didn't think they were solid, but she was making all those shots.
Althea Gibson's victories in tennis were as important to people as Jackie Robinson's integration in baseball.
4 breaks of serve in the set, and still there was nothing to choose between these two great players. Murray would hold in game 8 to level proceedings.
Place a lot of stock in what entertainers and athletes were doing because they were on the national, international stage, and they had such visibility that people held them in high esteem. There were a number of high-profile people like Sugar Ray Robinson and the boxer Joe Louis who helped Althea. They helped provide her with money so that she could compete. They also broke barriers in their respective fields in boxing, so they understood what she was going through.
The esteem of winning at such an international place as Wimbledon made Althea a huge star and an important figurehead for black people in sport and in life.
People lined up outside of her apartment building in Harlem. People met her at the airport. She was surprised to see how many people were standing there to greet her. People had celebrations everywhere that she went. And people, continued to celebrate for years, and they hold her in high esteem today. And she paved the way for a number of people, from Arthur Ashe to Venus and Serena Williams.
Wimbledon had evolved into the premier global tennis tournament, and demand was increasing for show court tickets. But the All England Club's unique entrance policy remained unchanged. It was the same in the 1950s and 1960s as it is today.
If you want to see the 100 yards run in under 10 seconds, then stand by the Wimbledon gates on the last day.
I think our approach to ticketing is very egalitarian. I don't think there's many sporting events in the world who have a public ballot for tickets open to anybody to apply and then deliberately holds back ground passes and a limited number of centre court tickets for people to queue up. I mean, last few years we had 20,000 people queuing in Wimbledon Park for 6,000 ground passes and 500 centre court tickets.
I think Wimbledon's always
Murray now
tried to
so close to the holy grail of British
fans.
tennis. The
That is
Scotsman
purpose
seemed
of Really
on
Queue
course
at
as he
Wimbledon.
dominated the
Wimbledon
next
could very
game to
easily
gain
just
3
sell all
championship
the court
points.
tickets
Backs
in
to
a
the
couple
wall
of days to
defiance
whoever
from
the highest bidders
Djokovic.
would be from
Eventually
corporate
brought the
companies,
score
but,
back to deuce.
The queue is the fairest way of getting 6,000 or 7,000 people a day into our grounds.
It's become a rite of passage almost. Now we've moved it into the park. It's become, and again for international people. I mean, if you go in the queue, I think if you're from Australia or South Africa and you're in London, it's you do a couple of days in the queue because it's a nice. So we provide a nice environment, but again they all add to the vibrancy, I think, of the atmosphere for people who come in here.
What we've now seen is almost like an emergent strategy, which is the queues are actually an important part of the fan experience. It's part of the product, it's part of the brand. And so rather than seeking to alleviate the queues, it's almost as though the All England have tried to perpetuate the queues, because it's all part of the camaraderie, it's part of the communal spirit, it's part of the event itself. So I think in some ways it was entirely accidental, but what Wimbledon are now doing is playing this out very, very well, because they've used the misfortune in a way that's actually helped to create a very interesting brand experience.
After the American dominance in the post-war years, a new nation emerged as a force to be reckoned with. The first country to view tennis as a team sport. The Australians roomed together, practiced together and drank together. They call it mateship, an unbreakable camaraderie which still lies at the heart of Australian sporting success.
Well, I think the Australian group, which was started by Sedgman McGregor, owed a great deal to Harry Hopman, the great coach and former player, who moulded those players into a great Davis Cup squad.
Well, Harry was, you know, he was really a very strong person. Couldn't teach you how to hit a ball that well, but he was a stickler for fitness. And I think his teams won so many matches because they could go all day and they were the fittest players. And he was very strict, you know, like I can remember our first trip away when DeRose won Hode's first trip away when they were 17. And I was about 21 or something. And he had us going to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and I wasn't used to going to bed at 10 o'clock at night, but you had to get into bed at 10 o'clock and turn the light out. If you didn't do what he said, he'd say, right, you'll be on the next plane and back to Australia.
Well, you know, you've got to take it back in its context, because it was amateur tennis. So amateur tennis really didn't mean that you were playing for prize money. You're playing for pride and, you know, and trophies. And it was really your opportunity to represent your nation.
The Australians' domination of the game coincided with the first mass push towards professionalism. But this wasn't a new idea. Big Bill Tilden had blazed a trail as early as the 1930s.
Tilden, as he advanced and got into his 30s, realized that he could make a buck off of this. And so he began to tour. Tilden gave older players an avenue to go into, and they all succeeded in. He became a champion. Then you turned pro, and you had to leave the big tournaments.
I won at Wimbledon, and I won the US, and then won Davis Cup. And then the opportunity opened up for me to turn professional and make a career out of being a top tennis player.
Got a telephone call in New York during the US Open, I think 1967, to wonder whether I was ready to sign a contract to play professional tennis. And at that point, I was ready to give up and retire from tennis and get a real job. But I was offered $30,000, which was 4 times what I could have made in any job back in South Africa at the time. And so I signed quickly.
The divide was absolute. By turning pro and accepting payment for playing the sport, you were excluded from all of the Grand Slams, including Wimbledon. By the 1960s, the amateur game was in turmoil. The top players had all been poached by the pro tours, led by former player Jack Kramer and promoter Lamar Hunt.
By 1967, the amateur game was really needing a boost because all the great champions have been signed to professional terms.
Turning professional wasn't an easy choice, because you know you're in a way you're abandoning, you know, Australia to some degree because of Davis Cup being very important. The touring teams that started you off, taking you around the world to improve your game to represent Australia, and then you're not representing anybody when you turn professional. And so it was a tough choice, but at the same time I felt I had to do something about my future, and I thought that was, you know, a legitimate way of accomplishing it.
The latest of the promoters was WCT, Lamar Hunt's organisation, and he signed up the Handsome Eight.
Well, as personalities, we were supposed to be enthusiastic and exciting and young and handsome. That was the whole idea, was to get a group of guys together that WCT could turn into personalities.
The capture of those players, who included John Newton, of course, and our own Roger Taylor, meant that the game now desperately needed to resolve the question of amateurism and professionalism.
Any sport in which money is being made and you're not paying the performers, but everybody else is getting money. The coaches are getting money, the presenters are getting money, the press is getting money, everybody's getting money, the people who sell the hot dogs are getting money, everybody's getting money, but the performers, I mean, that's upside down, that's insane.
The pressure reached its height when the best players in the world, players like Rod Laver and Ken Rosewall, were no longer able to play in the best championships in the world.
And it finally happened as a result of the All England Club staging in 1967 on the hallowed turf of the centre court a professional tournament. Shock horror.
Wimbledon and the BBC had a trial tournament of which I was the promoter and brought in the 8 best players, including Rod and Ken and Lou and Gonzalez and everybody, to find out if the fans would like to come to Wimbledon to see professionals. And we sold the place out all three days that we played, and that made it very easy for them to make the decision to go to open tennis.
It's out, and that's the championship. A very thrilling match indeed. 6-2, 6-2. 12-10, so Rod Laver becomes the first professional champion at Wimbledon.
In the history of the game, nothing was as important as that decision.
The All England Club
the first Grand Slam of this brand new era was the 1968 All England Championships. Fittingly, 6 years after his last, Rod Laver, the Rockhampton Rocket, won back his men's singles title.
For Andy Murray, the first British male Wimbledon champion since Fred Perry in 1936. It was all a little too much to take it.
And there was considerable talk about the pros being overrated, and that the amateurs were going to win. They were going to beat the pros. And fortunately, we as the professionals did pretty well.
Of that last point.
With the biggest stars back in the fold, the popularity of the championships exploded. But still the hallowed ground of Centre Court remained pristine. The All England Club stayed faithful to its ethos of understated elegance to the detriment of potential advertising revenue.
Time again, ladies and gentlemen, the Wimbledon champion for 2013,
Wimbledon is unique,
Britain's
and I think it's unique even amongst the 4 slams. If you look at commercial activity around the tournament as one example, you compare Roland Garros with Centre Court at Wimbledon. At Roland Garros, lots of sponsors' logos. In Wimbledon, no sponsorship logos. So it is a very unique and distinctive property. And the comparison that I would make with Wimbledon, certainly in terms of other cultural assets, if you like, is that it's a little bit like Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. It's quintessentially English. It's very distinctive. It really screams out Englishness, and that's very, very different, obviously, to other tennis tournaments and other sporting events in this kind of globalised environment that sport can offer.
I think it's been particularly a business philosophy of Wimbledon to differentiate itself from other organisations and other sporting events, and to make itself very individual. And I think by not having advertising on Centre Court and around the grounds, that does make Wimbledon quite unique in the world of sport today. And I think if we did have a lot of perimeter advertising, the danger is we would just have leveled ourselves to compete with other events and not have differentiated ourselves in that way.
The approach the All England Club has always taken is to have selected partners rather than sponsors, each of whom provides goods and services required for the event. Their minimal, almost subliminal presence on Centre Court has raised these particular brands to iconic status.
In 1978, Rolex, in his history, decided to be more part of the sporting world, and the elegance and the exclusivity of this Wimbledon Championship was really part of the heart of Rolex at that time, and it still is. So it's a major thing for us.
So I think we're immensely proud of our long-standing associationship with the championships at Wimbledon. Believe it or not, we've been an official ball supplier to the championships since 1902. That makes us partnership the longest standing in sports history.
Well, Robinson's Lemon Barley Water was indeed created at Wimbledon, and the story, I'm pretty certain is true, is that there was a Robinson sales representative at Wimbledon on a particular hot and very same day noticed that the players were looking pretty fatigued. So he took the initiative and got together a jug with some iced water, some lemon juice, some barley powder, mixed it together and encouraged the players to drink it because it would rehydrate them and invigorate them for the next match. And so there was born Robinson's Lemon Barley Water.
It's very, very interesting because I think Wimbledon faces something of a conundrum in that at the moment, by not having more visible logos, it is foregoing potentially a very strong revenue stream. but at the same time, the more it commercialises, the more potentially it tarnishes the essence of the Wimbledon brand.
We were talking about exclusivity, elegance, uniqueness. It's really the same thing for Rolex. Tradition, innovation. So these are the roots of our association.
As the 1960s gave way to the 70s, professionalism brought a new outlook to Wimbledon. It was yet another Australian who led the way in the women's game. Following in the footsteps of her male counterparts, the exceptionally athletic Margaret Court became the first Australian woman to claim the Wimbledon singles title, heralding the arrival of a new breed of female tennis player.
Very fortunate that one of our all-time greats, Frank Sedgman, opened his gymnasium to me and to work in one of his offices. He trained with me. I used to train in the gym 5 mornings a week, and the English press used to give me a hard time. They used to call me the Aussie Amazon. But I always remember, I think it was my fitness that kept me in the game for probably 15, 16 years without injury. And it was all the training I did as a young person, and I loved it.
In those days, it wasn't ladylike to say that she went to gym and work out, because it wasn't sort of ladylike to have muscles.
Court and Goolagong, later Mrs. Corley, were two of a triumvirate of precociously talented women who played out an intense rivalry that spanned 15 years. Margaret set the bar physically, Yvonne possessed bewitching balletic grace, but a diminutive American with a big personality brought mental toughness with a touch of gamesmanship to the centre court.
Oh, I remember, the first few times that I played Billie Jean, she scared me because she was always, she was always talking and she seemed bigger than life to me. And she was an aggressive player, serving volley player, and I thought, oh, okay, here she comes. So I used to spend more time watching her than paying attention to what I was doing. Even though I had a lot of tough matches against Margaret, I think Billie Jean was the one that gave me a really tougher time.
Well, I think Billie knew tactically how to do it too, and I think I was one that I could turn off to her when she started to perform. And I think a lot of the young players didn't understand that, and she would get through them in the tactics side of it also. But she knew, I knew, she never moved me. I think that sort of helped me tremendously and got through her a little bit. Yvonne and I played many times. The only time I ever lost to Yvonne was in the Wimbledon tournament. I'd played her many, many times. I think it was the year when I found that I was on centre court and I was 3 months pregnant.
I came along when Billie Jean and Margaret were on top and playing each other in all the finals. So, I had those two to contend with. And then along came Chris and then Martina. So I think it's been great that knowing that I've played both generations. And, did reasonably well against both.
Knowing that I got to play against the best of the best is always going to be a great feeling. What's really important to us, too, is that we really help forge the future of women's tennis. I think every generation's job is to make the next generation better.
Between the three of them, Court, Corley and King won 11 titles, and Billie Jean would go on to set records on the court and become a tireless campaigner for equality off it. As the 1970s drew to a close, a new generation of professionals had emerged, fitter, stronger and more powerful than their predecessors. Echoing the promoters' mission of the 1960s, the new breed of tennis players were more than just athletes, they were personalities. The ice cool, the bratish, the controversial and the heartthrobs. Tennis and Wimbledon braced itself for the most exciting era the game had ever seen. The 1980s and 90s turned Wimbledon from a refined sport to the modern power game we see today. Great rivalries ritualized every summer. Technology revolutionized tennis, and centre court became a dueling ground between its greatest champions.
Each one required someone else to just help them go that extra stage further and be that little bit better.
Ultimately, they're better for the existence of the other because it sort of becomes this benchmark. It sort of becomes context.
You just wondered how long the players could go on playing this extraordinary level of tennis.
Unbelievable shot.
I think the whole world was waiting for us to play, and for me to play John was something special.
Game Djokovic.
By the summer of 1980, something was needed to lift our spirits. Riots and demonstrations were a common sight around Britain as the country struggled with a new era of austerity under the Conservative government of Margaret Thatcher.
The ladies not a turn.
At Wimbledon, the weather seemed to reflect the mood. It was one of the wettest tournaments on record. Out of the gloom, though, emerged one of the greatest matches in Wimbledon history. A drama of compelling intensity that defined two careers and changed tennis forever. More than 30 years on, it's difficult to distinguish truth from myth. But when Bjorn Borg sank to his knees at 6-11 on the 5th of July 1980, tennis had become a modern sport, celebrity-driven, youthful, and glamorous.
I think we did a lot for tennis in general. The interest, the impact of our match, not only here at Wimbledon, but all over the world.
As the first tennis rock star, Borg led the way. He was a symbol of the flower power generation, attracting a new, young audience to the conservative confines of the All England Club.
Wimbledon, I think, prefers to keep things, for the most part, relatively low-key, and Borg shook it up, without a doubt, and just suddenly you had screaming girls hammering on the side of the court, hammering for this guy.
But Borg's personality didn't match his looks. He was reserved, boring even, but he just kept winning. 4 straight Wimbledon titles coming into the 80 final.
Borg, my favorite tennis player of all time. You know, the cool Swede would sort of waddle in there with the big shoulders and the little waist, with the headband, say nothing, just go through the game, play it, and then beat everybody to a pulp.
I think those who used to sit at home on a men's and women's finals day, and it was perceived that Wimbledon was watched by perhaps mothers and fathers and grandparents, suddenly it was watched by kids who were leaping up and down, looking at this kid with long blonde hair who was this new sensation.
It was only when a true rebel, a New Yorker through and through with plenty to say for himself, appeared across the net, did Borg's character gain the contrast it so badly needed.
No, the call came before the ball was played. You never even called?
You would just go crazy, and you never knew what was going to happen. You knew he was going to lose it at some point.
He never said anything. He called a fault. He didn't call a fault, he just went like that. And he called a fault. Play a left.
Most people found his behaviour objectionable when he was around there. The way he would always query line decisions and argue with officials and stamp his foot as if he was the only person who mattered.
Mr. McEnroe, you are getting a public warning. Now please play on. Keep your mouth shut out here. I'd like the referee over here.
I think fans were often sort of very conflicted in their feelings. They loved the player and how he performed. They didn't always like the behavior, so there were times that they were very torn, but he could win them back with his play.
He was a beautiful player to watch. That service motion, that serve and volley game, it was just spectacular.
this incredibly talented guy with hands like butter. I mean, those beautiful volleys. I mean, no one could make anyone's hands softer than McEnroe at the net.
As 2 p.m. approached on finals day in 1980, the world had been drawn into the drama. Their contrasts in personality made for a perfect rivalry. The high school favorite versus the hot-head challenger.
To play John was something special because we played a lot of time before the final, and all the matches we played was very close matches. So I was looking forward to play him, and I knew that John wanted to beat me really badly.
I figured that my game was well suited to play his at Wimbledon, and so I was very excited about it. I felt like my time had come.
And so it seemed, as McEnroe took the opening set 6-1 in just 26 minutes.
That's it. That's the first set. McEnroe.
Tennis, it is said, is like boxing without gloves. And just like the boxing ring, great rivalries lift the sport into the realms of theatre, allowing character to be revealed and narrative to be built. And there is no bigger stage than the finals day on Centre Court at Wimbledon. In the early years, rivalries were good-natured, wrapped up in sportsmanship and etiquette of the day. Times soon changed.
Tennis, I think, is special in that it is single-arm combat. It's one against one, and it's your technique against the other player's technique, but I think it's also your mental strength against the other player's mental strength and your ability to rise to the occasion when the occasion demands.
It helps if they have contrasting styles, and if they're the two best players, all the better. And then what tends to happen is they keep raising the bar for each other.
You really need that other player to push you. You need that benchmark. If you just go and win every match, people are going to say, yeah, but he wasn't. What did he do when he was pressed? He didn't have any competition. So ultimately, they're better for the existence of the other because it sort of becomes this benchmark that gives their greatness some context.
In the women's game, another rivalry was also flourishing. 5 times Martina Navratilova and Chris Evert met in a Wimbledon final, and 5 times Navratilova came out on top, with Evert twice overcoming her rival in semi-finals. Like Borg and McEnroe, they were perfect foils, and like a good novel, a new chapter unfolded each high summer.
With Chris, I felt like it was my match to win or my match to lose, like I was more in control. But still, Chris was so good and was not going to give you anything, and you had to earn it. So I knew I had to really keep my cool and keep it together, because she was certainly not going to give it at all.
Navratilova's fitness, determination and power would take the game to a new level in the 1980s. Her 9 singles titles still a record to this day.
She changed people's attitudes towards her in so many ways and conquered so many demons and won beautifully on this court, playing in a style that I wish we saw more players playing today, the wonderful serve and volley style, but the emotion of her on centre court, it did something to her.
Navratilova's dominance was challenged by Steffi Graf. But though the pair met in 3 successive finals, Graf winning 2, the mantle had already passed on. Graf won 7 titles, but never found a rival who could question her supremacy on centre court. In the second set of the 1980 final, Borg began to play like the champion once more.
3 sets to love, 6-3, 6-1, 6-4.
But McEnroe stood firm.
Borg was in trouble at 4-all. He saved some break points. You felt like he was teetering on the brink there a little bit. He did not want to spot McEnroe a 2-set lead, but he managed to squeak the set out 7-5 after he could well have lost it 6-4. That was important. You know, there's a huge difference between 1-set all and 2 sets to love the other way. And both players knew it, and I think it pretty much carried Borg through the third set very comfortably.
Now on level terms, Borg's experience on centre court began to show, taking the third set 6-3. If the 1980 final marked the start of a new era of celebrity, it also marked the beginning of the end of an era of artistry, guile and grace. Just 5 years later, a teenager from West Germany took the game by storm. When unseeded Boris Becker won the first of his 3 Wimbledon singles titles, he was just 17 years old, the youngest ever. But the clue to the real impact Becker made on the game came in his nickname, Boom Boom.
And you see him now and you say, that was Boom Boom? This guy's not so big. But at the time, he had this sort of hulking physique and the big serve and the acrobatic volleys. And in some ways, his game was tailored to Wimbledon.
I think he filled young people with confidence that here was a kid, 17. I mean, you think of 17-year-olds nowadays. Could a 17-year-old now go out and win Wimbledon? I don't think so.
Armed with one of a new generation of graphite rackets, Becker transformed the sport into the power game we see today. For him and tennis, there was no turning back. For close to 100 years, players made do with wooden rackets strung with catgut. Newfangled designs came and went, but it was still about the craftsman and not the tools. The global growth of the game brought new commercial opportunities for the racket manufacturers, and new materials were tried and tested. Jimmy Connors embraced a steel racket in the 70s, whilst John McEnroe employed a composite version in the early 80s. But the quantum leap came soon after with the introduction of oversized graphite rackets and man-made strings. Stronger yet lighter, and wielding
the set-up pass once again.
Could hit harder and more freely.
15-13.
There were big implications for the whole game, not least for Wimbledon, where the fast grass surface already favored.
This time, 25 minutes played in this men's singles final at Wimbledon. First break to Murray.
Something had to be done to maintain the balance between power and touch. The speed of the balls was reduced.
That's very tidy. That is 41 minutes. First-class play, at times from both. It's Murray who wins it.
Slower than it was 10 years ago. I've heard players say they think it's slower than the French.
The quickest serve of the tournament by far. And he still lost the point.
And people have said that slowed the courts down. What's actually happened is it's made the bounce a little bit higher. So if the ball's coming through
superb.
a little few inches higher, then it gives the players more opportunity to return it.
Oh, you're joking, that's two.
The fact is that
oh boy, can he move.
Because of the racket technology, plays the same.
Deep second serve, he went for it.
It's not just grass.
And he's taking a giant step towards the second Wimbledon title here.
They come with their strokes honed on hard court and clay court.
He played him back in, Raonic, great pass.
Springs, balls, or the grass, a player's movement has changed drastically. From attacking the net a few years ago to counter-attacking from the baseline today. So good
Murray's having a lovely time now.
The ball has all but disappeared. A fact mourned by many.
We've had Wimbledon finals where he's there.
Great sets again. Defeats Milos Raonic.
You can win a major
His improvement has been a delight to watch, but it's Murray's time in the sunshine of centre court once again.
In rivalries in the 1980s and 90s. Boris Becker and Stefan Edberg brought one identical serve and volley games to centre court for 3 successive finals. Edberg edging out the trilogy 2-1. Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi developed a worldwide
Just been a game discovered. That's what the crowd wanted. They feel we may have a match here.
Before the balls and supposedly the grass were slowed down, with the balance still too much in favour of the serve volleyer. Sampras prospered, winning Wimbledon a record 7 times.
That was a magnificent rally from both sides of the net. Williams. She hasn't won the match yet, although you might think she has from that reaction, but she's halfway there.
McEnroe continued to serve and volley superbly. But Borg's ground strokes were as precise as ever.
The shot of the match. That's from Angelique Kerber.
6-5 to Borg, and match point to the Swede.
Serena thinks she either hit the net or...
Yeah, Miss Williams.
Just the beginning of the tiebreak will continue to ebb and flow.
It's Miss Williams. Again, 2 sets to 1. 14 years after that first victory here. Grand Slam number 22. Irresistible, majestic. And the judgment of history will surely be that she was in a class of her own.
It just seemed like the crowd was really into it. It just had this magical moment you don't feel that often.
Championship point number 4.
Borg on match point during that tiebreaker lunged and fell on a backhand volley, which if he had made that volley, he would have won the match, and Lily would have been 10 feet in front of me, and I would have been there with like my normal lens with the entire stadium and all the crowd reacting, and it would have been just in my face, but he misses the point.
It was as if both men were feeding off each other, cajoling, pushing, lifting each other to new heights. For 20 minutes, Borg and McEnroe produced tennis of verve and artistry rarely seen even on centre court.
Every other point was either set point or championship point. I mean, it would just go back and forth like that, and every point was won. These guys were playing fabulous tennis. It wasn't like anybody was choking.
For a heavyweight boxing contest, they'd stop the fight.
I used to make notes on my pad that I'd devised for scoring, and it was very difficult to keep track of all the match points and the set points that were coming and going. And I would sort of press the button to cut the microphone and say, did I get that right? Was that the 6th match point?
It's a shocking miss for me from Roger Federer.
Oh, a marvellous volley again.
This is the greatest match that's ever been played. And you watch it. And you're right here. And all of a sudden, you're right here. And that tiebreak just goes on. And nobody loses at a point. Every point is a winner.
McEnroe saved 5 match points to add to the 2 saved earlier in the set.
Unbelievable shot.
While Borg saved 6 set points before McEnroe finally seized the moment.
You just wondered how long the players could go on playing this extraordinary level of tennis. Until suddenly, Ball missed the volley and set point.
6-7, 6-4, 6-3. Yes, 2 sets in a row. 4 sets.
You would have thought the roof of centre court was going to blow off because the cheers for making it 2 sets all were just extraordinary.
When it was over, I mean, I thought for sure there's no way I can lose it. You know, I thought the guy's got to let down. I mean, this is it now.
Well, now this final has become an absolute classic.
Deep inside, I thought definitely I'm going to lose this match. I was so disappointed and mad at myself that how could I lose this match? I was thinking that way, how can I lose this match? Even if it was like 1 more set to play.
Serena Williams.
Wimbledon has known other rivalries since. In the women's game, the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, are almost too close to share a court competitively. Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal have enjoyed 3 epic finals, the last of them at least as gripping as Borg and McEnroe, and possibly of greater quality from first to last.
I think if you asked Roger Federer if he would be the player he is were it not for Nadal, and asked Nadal the same question, they would both say no. They've needed each other to raise their game to higher peaks, and I think the same would be true of Navratilova and Evert. The same would be true of Borg and McEnroe. Each one required someone else to just help them go that extra stage further and be that little bit better.
Perhaps because of the passing of time, a longing for a bygone age, nothing seems to eclipse the 1980 final. After losing the 4th set in such a dramatic way, many thought Borg was gone.
Starting the 5th set, I remember walking out to serve, and I knew that it was crucial to hold serve first game in the 5th set. But still I was thinking about the tiebreaker. But then it was more like it came that I could relax in a way, because I didn't know what I was thinking about. I was just playing. And funny enough, that was probably the most relaxing set I played of all the 5 sets.
Such was the fortitude of the man that Borg would lose just 2 points on his serve the rest of the match. 7 games to 6 up, a record 5th straight victory was almost his. Cue the most iconic celebration in Wimbledon history.
Many consider the 2008
Even today,
Wimbledon
people
men's singles final
around the world,
to be the
they
greatest
remember the
tennis
match.
of all time.
Some people come up,
third consecutive Wimbledon final between
telling
Spain's
both me
Rafael
and John,
Nadal
what a
and
great
Roger
tiebreaker.
Federer
They
from
have no
Switzerland,
idea who
the 2
won the
best players of
tiebreaker.
their
They remember that
generation,
we played a
and both
tiebreaker.
all-time greats of the game.
That's a nice
Federer
match
had won
to
their
remember,
previous
I think, both
2
for me
Wimbledon
and John.
finals and was looking to record his 6th consecutive
Of course,
singles
someone's got to
title,
lose, but in a
eclipsing
sense,
Bjorn Borg's
I could look
open-era
at my
record.
kids in the eye and say that
However,
that
just
made me
over
a better
month earlier,
player and a better
Nadal had
person,
comprehensively
and I was
defeated
more
Federer at
respected as a
Roland
tennis
Garros
player
to take
because
his
of
4th
that. The
consecutive
excitement
French
that
Open
surrounded the
title,
tiebreaker.
so the signs were good for the Spaniard.
Being part of one of the
Nadal
great
started
matches in tennis
impressively by
history.
taking the first set. We join the action in the second, with Federer serving at 4 games all. Your commentators are Andrew Castle and Tim Henman.
McEnroe would end Borg's reign a year later with the first of his 3 singles titles. Borg retired, aged 26, made 1 comeback and did not return to Wimbledon again until the Millennium celebrations on centre court. McEnroe, who was initially refused membership of the All England Club because of his behaviour, is no longer Super Brat. The 1980 final is a tribute to an era which saw some of Wimbledon's greatest rivalries and its most dominant players. Few thought the game on grass could be bettered so soon, but greatness cannot be confined so neatly to place and time. a brilliant new champion was just a heartbeat away. The 21st century, the demands of a modern, top-class sporting event kept the eyes of the Wimbledon organisers fixed firmly on the horizon. Physical changes were afoot, most notably the handsome new Millennium Building, which, although state-of-the-art, fitted seamlessly into its elegant surroundings. Wimbledon was still unmistakably Wimbledon, as innovation and tradition continued to stroll companionably hand in hand at the All England Club. But as always at Wimbledon, there was a respectful nod to the past. The Millennium Championships parade of past champions on the middle Saturday proved that for a few, time can stand still. The centre court crowd rose as one to welcome back the players that had immortalised the tournament, and there was a long overdue welcome for one of its favourite songs.
He's back on centre court today for the first time since 1981. Show him how much we've missed him. It's Bjorn Borg.
Perhaps only then did Borg understand how much he had truly missed the game, and how much the game had missed him. But the first decade of the new millennium would be synonymous with an entirely new generation, each of whom had yet to inscribe their names on the Wimbledon Roll of Honour. In this, the final part of our series, we take a look at the first decade of a brand new century, which would showcase dominance in both the men's and women's games in a way never witnessed before. But as always, Wimbledon would also provide a fitting backdrop for the stuff that dreams are made of, often from a most unexpected source. But initially at least, there was one story still to reach its natural conclusion. Not since the halcyon days of Borg himself had one man been so utterly dominant of centre court.
Will serve for a two-set lead. Nadal leads 5 games to 4. Second set, and by 1 set.
Pete Sampras came into the new century bidding to win his 7th singles title, a record and marker of such enormity that even the American had difficulty putting it to the back of his mind.
I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't think about it. Sure, I thought about it constantly, about if it was going to happen here, just kind of the drama and the build-up from the match.
The occasion demanded drama, and the greatest stage in the sport complied, as the usually nerveless Sampras made uncharacteristic errors early on.
Well, who would have believed it? Successive double faults from Sampras, and Rafter wins the first set.
But Sampras wasn't about to let the situation get away from him. There was simply too much at stake. Having levelled, he then assumed command.
And he's taken it. And Sampras takes a giant leap towards a 7th Wimbledon title.
I knew it was getting dark. You look at the clock, it was 9 o'clock, and that's pretty much way past the usual stuff about 8:30. Who would want to come out the next day and finish it? Fortunately, things just kind of worked out well for me there. It was kind of a perfect ending to the record, the way it ended that night, and it was just kind of one of those surreal moments that I've witnessed many times, but to be a part of it was very cool.
The sight of the usually impassive Sampras in near darkness climbing into the stands to embrace his parents as flashbulbs pierced the gathering gloom provided a suitably theatrical ending to the Millennium Fortnight.
Was just fine.
But in any sport, a champion's invincibility is fleeting, a snapshot of an era. It takes a brave man to walk away when his powers are at their greatest. All too often, the king is humbled by a pretender to the throne. Roger Federer was 11 years old when Sampras won his first Wimbledon title. But the talented teenager, with a tantalising array of shots, showed composure beyond his years in his very first match on centre court.
He's done it. The champion is out.
I heard like so many people watched it on TV, so many people were happy for me, even though they were sad for Sampras, you know. But maybe they felt like somebody new was arriving, and that I could then fulfill, also live up to the expectations a couple of years later was unbelievable.
The centre court is a place where dreams are made and shattered. And in 2001, there was a fairy tale in the making. But the heroic night at its centre was a battle-scarred Croatian who had failed to lift the trophy on each of his 3 previous final appearances.
So many guys took the first chance or second chance, and I get 3 chances, and I couldn't take it. So I said, must be something wrong with me, you know, and probably I'm never going to get another chance.
His appearance in the last 16 was deemed a bit of a fluke, the final gallant switch of Goran's topsy-turvy career. But the aces kept flowing, the tide kept rising, and it seemed only one outcome was possible. That year, the world of Wimbledon was slightly out of kilter. When Goran walked out to centre court for his 4th final, it was on the 3rd Monday of the championships, christened People's Monday, in front of a 10,000-strong crowd that had queued for tickets on a first-come, first-served basis.
I don't think it's going to ever be that kind of atmosphere, you know, because it was Monday. They let so many tickets for the normal people. The atmosphere was like not on tennis, like on football.
There's no mistaking what the crowd want.
And by that time I said, listen, this is another chance, and this time if you don't win it, I don't know, probably I killed myself there.
To see what it meant to him, to just see that his whole body shuddering with emotion on that particular day, that here was a guy who really felt, probably when he walked out the year before in the Champions Parade, that he felt as though he didn't belong. And a year on from that, there he is lifting the men's singles title.
I was the committee member who was given the responsibility of taking Goran for his post-match interview.
Everyone would like to raise their glasses to Goran.
I remember one of the reporters asking Goran the question, you know, what happens next? You've now fulfilled your dream, you've won Wimbledon. And he came out with this now quite famous saying of...
My dreams came true, and whatever I do in my life, whatever I go, whatever I'm going to always be Wimbledon champion.
Looks like Federer fancies a bit more tennis as well.
The first decade of the new century proved a productive one for the women's game as well, or at least for one family. The Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, emerged from the city of Compton on the south side of Los Angeles to dominate the women's game. They changed perceptions about who could play the game and how it could be played. When Venus won the first of her singles titles in 2000, beating her younger sister in the semi-final, the first of many encounters at Wimbledon, it signified the start of a stranglehold on the Venus Rosewater dish that would run and run.
It's so cool to be part of Wimbledon history. It's just, you know, if there's going to be a slam that you do well at, you got to choose Wimbledon. That's been my choice, and immediately I get more pep in my step and hitting better and running faster and serving bigger. My dad always told us to pick a slam that we wanted to win more than anyone else, and so I picked Wimbledon.
At the end of the 2010 championships, the sisters had held the trophy aloft an amazing 9 times, and only one final had failed to feature a Williams.
You think of Wimbledon, you think of classic, you think of history, and it's always a buzz every time I walk in there. It's just, there's a whole new spirit. I honestly feel that spirit at every Grand Slam. I just really enjoy playing it, and I enjoy getting there and just being
So
part
Federer
of
was
something
back in business.
special.
We now pick up the action in the 4th
Sibling
set
rivalry
and another
reached a whole new
tie-break.
level. The
Nadal
Williams
is
family,
leading
the ultimate
4-2,
winners,
so he's just
and the
3
women's
points
game
away
was
from his
changed
first
forever.
Wimbledon title.
But the first time when I saw Venus in France, you know, like you admiring ballet dancers. When I saw few shots which she was hitting, I knew she was special. I knew she is something which is incredible. And every time when they're at the tournament has a different level. But you still have to have this kind of stamina inside of you which will allow you to not to be afraid to be number one. And I think both of these sisters like that. They're not afraid to be on the top of the whole game.
He's grown up a bit.
But at the same time, a new power was emerging in the wings. Eastern Europe produced a stream of top-class players through the first decade of the century, many of them products of the tennis academies of Florida. By 2009, 5 of the top 10 seeds in the women's singles draw were Russian. The Cold War in tennis dresses? At times, the Williams sisters must have felt overwhelmed by the sheer weight of numbers.
Well, I think when the Soviet Union broke up into its various satellite countries, there was a freedom overcame lots of these nations, and sport is a way to express your desire for freedom. And I think a lot of parents in those countries saw sport as a means that their kids could blossom.
Well, when I went, it was national coach. I mean, I was selected from 15 countries. It was good. It was difficult. It was tough. It was pressure. I mean, I had a great opportunity to choose all of these good girls, to put them together and prepare them the way I thought they had to do. And the money, it was a way out. I mean, the way out to the better life.
Born in Siberia, coached in America, Maria Sharapova came to Wimbledon as a promising starlet. She hit the ball like a missile and with almost as many decibels. But the general consensus was that 17-year-old's time was yet to come. Who knew that beneath the almost fragile-looking exterior was a core of pure steel?
Nick Bollettieri came to me and was saying, "You're supposed to look at this great girl." I saw that fighting spirit which she had, incredible. But of course, when Maria came here and won Wimbledon, I think it was a little bit shock for everybody.
Set point or match
because
point.
We all knew about Dementieva, Myskina, and we knew that Marsha is coming up. We knew she's talented, but we didn't know that she will do it so quick. It was incredible.
I mean, even though I had so much attention from the quarterfinals on, you know, to me, whenever I stepped on that court, everything was blocked. I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear any voices. I don't remember what people said. I was just concentrating on myself and the ball, and that's it. And it's really amazing.
The Russian teenager produced the performance of a lifetime to win the title, the trophy, and the hearts of the millions watching at home. The very first television broadcast from Wimbledon was in 1937, and it still remains the principal way that most people enjoy the tournament. But the huge leaps forward in technology have meant that the nature of the broadcast is rapidly changing.
Radio first started here way back almost at the turn of the century, which was the first broadcast iteration of Wimbledon. We were probably most notably the first live colour broadcast in the United Kingdom. The notion that what you'd been watching originally was black and white, no chance of the vivid green of the grass and so on, suddenly being converted into colour was fantastic. And in many ways that's what kick-started the developments. And 2 or 3 years ago, of course, we became a fully high-definition tournament, one of the first to do that. And this year, on our 125th, we'll of course be doing 3D coverage from centre court of the final stages of the tournament for the very first time.
We have got a number of broadcasters fighting over our rights, and what we seek is to try and find, not surprisingly, the best financial deal, but also the deal that gives us the best coverage in terms of reaching the most people within that territory that we possibly can. I think the whole intention really is to make sure that we reach all audiences, wherever they are and how they can view us.
The net clearly is where it's at. It's a very difficult beast. It's a different beast for those of us who come from a particular background and those of us of my age, frankly. We're learning new techniques and we're learning how it should be done. But actually, it's where significantly more people every year are getting their Wimbledon coverage and Wimbledon information from, and we really have to be alongside that, if not leading it sooner or later.
Wimbledon's official supplier of information technology is IBM, a relationship that began modestly with graphics for the BBC in 1990 before evolving into the state-of-the-art system that it is today.
The first year that the public were involved
outside of the BBC graphics statistics was 1996, when IBM created the official website. In 1999, it was the first year that we did an on-site system for the public, players and press, which gave detailed and real-time statistics as each match was progressing on the show courts. And over the years since then, we've expanded that out to not just show courts, but actually every single court that's in play at Wimbledon. So for every score that's played on court, the chair umpire records what's happened. That data flows back to the IBM scoring system and is sent out over an internet link to our 3 data centres, where it's then pushed out to the millions of people who are watching the website live in real time. And for that chain of events to happen is actually sub-seconds. So very often you'll be watching on the website, you'll see the score updated before the umpire has a chance to call it on court, because he's waiting for the applause to die down.
The 2 best passing shots.
Wimbledon is a tournament that has thrived on rivalries. Incredible finals that have staked a claim for the title best match ever.
What's next?
Borg McEnroe, Navratilova Evert, Becker Edberg. But the class of 2008 was extra special. When Roger Federer walked from the dressing room on the final Sunday, he was aiming for a record-breaking 6th consecutive title, but it was by no means a foregone conclusion. Rafael Nadal, the dynamic Spaniard, had honed his grass court game to near perfection, and a mouth-watering clash awaited the centre court crowd. Finally, here was a player deemed a worthy opponent to the mercurial Swiss. His 5 previous titles were an achievement of almost mythical proportions, but had rarely seemed in doubt. Such was Federer's utter dominance on the grass.
Having won 5 in a row, for me, it's an absolute dream come true. It's almost disbelief still to some degree. People see me in a different way. And now when they see me play, they have the feeling they're seeing, you know, history at work, you know. It's different now than before. Times have definitely changed now.
There was a
so the
sense
match all square at 2 sets all, and you rejoin it at 7 games all in the final set. Federer to serve.
If you were going to map out, you know, when is tennis at its peak, it's when the 2 best players who have this rivalry face each other in the final match of the great tournament.
Just 12 months earlier, Federer had equalled Borg's record of 5 titles on the bounce. In 1981, McEnroe, a flash left-hander, had finally prevailed against the cool Swede. And the comparisons with this match were the stuff that journalists' dreams were made of. Nadal's firepower had found its range, and the reigning champion appeared shell-shocked. 90 minutes into the match, and Federer was staring down the barrel of a 2-set deficit.
It's another half chance for Nadal.
Federer comes out in the second set, gets an early lead, and Nadal sort of storms back. And you really thought that the way that second set went, in this set, Federer had it and blew it. What does this guy really have left for the rest of the day?
You put yourself in Nadal's shoes. You're playing the player who is the king of Wimbledon at that stage. You're 2 sets to love up in the final. Now, you try and imagine how mentally he must be feeling. Obviously, if I win the next set, I'm the champion, but can I possibly keep up the standard of play that I've had for sets 1 and 2? Well, maybe I can, but somehow Roger's got to be Roger in a minute.
Federer est challenged the corner left baseline. Ball was gone out.
To the relief of the crowd, Federer's pinpoint accuracy had returned, although it took the electronic brain of Hawkeye to confirm it. Ironic, since the world #1 had made no secret of his distaste for an innovation he deemed an affront to sport's moral code, but which was now a fixture on tennis courts the world over.
I think any technology who can improve the game, I think is welcome. I think is very good, because it's micromillimeters we're talking about, you know, decision in or out.
Essentially, we set up 5 cameras for each end. These cameras are sort of set up, focused on that half of the court, and then essentially they work individually with a PC to track the ball in relation to the line in 2 dimensions. And then all that information is then fed to a control machine, which sort of acts as the That's just the sort of brain of the operation where it just puts everything together. And once everything's mapped together, it's put into a small file with just a simple track of the ball, where the player's gone. And then again, that falls to the virtual reality side of it, which is what everyone sees at home, which is sort of the pretty end of the system, which lets you see whether the ball's in or out. And the level of error of a line call is and does roughly equate to about 3.6 millimetres, which is roughly about the size
the
of
importance of these points.
Hawkeye shows how good the linesmen are. You know, this if you see, they are the play is only 30% right, and the rest is 25 to 30% right. I think it shows, Hawkeye shows how good the officials are.
The titanic struggle continued. The spectators spellbound and the play sublime. As the Federer comeback continued in the fourth set, this match promised to be the equivalent of Borg-McEnroe for the digital generation.
It wasn't until, really to me, the fourth set that people said, wait a second, this is a special match. It's going to be the final match on center court before the roof comes up. It's 1 versus 2. It's Federer sort of proudly trying
with the crucial break as the light on centre court starts to fade. Back we go with Nadal serving for the championship at 8-7. The score is juice.
Wimbledon. There's so much going on.
The fourth set was just tremendous tennis again, and spellbinding. I mean, tie breaks in it as well, and just the levels that Roger found.
The momentum appeared to be with the 5-time champion, but Nadal was never going to lie down. His break in the 15th game of the final set proved decisive.
Nadal 3-2, 6-4.
That celebration, I think, alongside Ivan Izovic in 2001, those are the two that stand out through the sheer joy and the sheer emotion and it coursing through the entire body.
Amazing feeling for me when Wimbledon, and the last one Spanish is very tough, but for me it's a dream. I always dream about win here any day, and I have the time.
Federer's magnificent run ends. Nadal is the top.
I think if you sort of look at all the components of this match, the quality of play, the swinging momentum, 1 versus 2, everything on the line, I think it's going to be hard to replicate Federer-Nadal of 2009.
The following year, Federer contested another epic match, but this time the valiant Andy Roddick provided the opposition. It was the 3rd time the two men had contested a Wimbledon final, and it seemed as though the luck might this time be on the American side. But in the longest 5th set of a men's final in the history of the championships, Federer clung on to win 16-14, securing his 6th Wimbledon crown and a record 15th Grand Slam singles title.
I had my first win here in 2003. I had a win here as a junior. I beat Sampras in 2001, and then the rest is history. And I've had so much success here, and it's a tournament I love most. I love coming here. It's such an honor to be a member of the club, and I hope I can do it again.
But the duration of that final set would pale into
Wimbledon
insignificance
title,
just the following
so
year,
ending Roger
when a
Federer's
first-round
incredible
match between Nicolas
5-year reign
Mahut and
at
John Isner
SW19.
broke every record in the
This
book.
was truly a classic
The two
match.
combatants
Two
spent
champions
11 hours
playing
and
their
5
very
minutes
best
over
on
3
tennis's
days,
greatest
slugging it out on court 18. Even the scoreboard struggled to cope with the ever-rising numbers. But eventually it was the young American who prevailed, 70 games to 68. Isner and Mahut, some names are destined to be forever entwined. Rafael Nadal, along with Serena Williams, will defend his title in the 125th Championships. The first organisers of the tournament would marvel now at the rich heritage they created, at the size, scope and luxury of the modern championships. But the beauty of the game, the aesthetic quality of the surroundings and the athleticism of the players would be easily recognisable a century and a quarter after Wimbledon's tentative beginnings. It is the want of variety that will prevent lawn tennis from taking rank among our great games, wrote Spencer Gore. 125 years on, Wimbledon's first champion might be forced to revise his opinion. This is a tournament that means so much to so many.
Wimbledon is very different to any other tournament on this planet.
Wimbledon, it's like a peak where you're trying to get in, you know? It's something like it's a star in the sky.
Unique.
Magic.
Pure.
Green. Amazing.
Special.
Tradition.